opinion. So I do think that tech stocks, you've seen a little bit of a profit taking. I think that's due to valuations. Having said that, earnings growth is still really, really strong. So I still think there's a trade there, perhaps not at the pace that we've seen over the last 2 years.
King, if you're thinking growth is going to come back, I mean, how much is this going to be down to earnings, right? Because this week we're really getting into the thick of the current earnings season. We've got Tesla, also Alphabet, kicking things off for the Mag 7. If those numbers come in and also the guidance strong, I think that could set off the growth trade again, don't you?
I do, and as I mentioned, it's still early. You know, we've had only 14% of companies out of the S&P 500 reporting, but 80% of them have beat to the upside. So those are very strong numbers. With regards to names like Alphabet and Tesla, you know, I don't think every mega cap is equal in terms of their valuations. So what I mean by that is, if you look at Nvidia and Microsoft, for example, you could argue that valuations are high relative to their historical averages. Names like Tesla and Alphabet, their valuations are actually pretty reasonable. So their hurdles to sort of eclipse are relatively low. So if they put up some decent numbers, we can see the stocks start to work again.
King, can we rewind back to the data and back to the jobless claims last week? 243,000, higher than expected, highest since August last year. Was there anything in there that suggests something is breaking in the economy and we could be heading towards a growth scare?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say breaking as in B-R-A-K-E and not breaking B-R-E-A-K. So I think we're decelerating. I think that's what we're seeing in terms of jobless claims going higher. Unemployment rate is going higher. That being said, it's still a relatively healthy job market. So I don't think the economy is falling apart. I think it is decelerating, as we just discussed, with all the Fed, monetary policy that we've seen the last 2 years. But I actually think of it more of this kind of this Goldilocks type scenario where growth is not too hot to get inflation back high up again, but just enough to keep the economy chugging along.
All right, King, listen, we got to go. Great to talk to you. Appreciate the time. Keep safe. Do it again soon. King Lip, Baker Avenue Wealth Management, joining us live. All right, we're going to take a quick break on Squawk as we tail out. Take a look at how Bitcoin, BTC, is trading early Asia. Bring up the charts. Do a quick price check, shall we? Okay, we'll show you that in just a bit. We'll go for a quick break and reload, and we're back in 2.
Enjoying good food and knowing that we've helped other people makes me really happy. I work for Total Energies in Nairobi, helping people transition to LPG. LPG stands for liquefied petroleum gas. LPG is an alternative to solid fuel. The effects of wood fuel are horrible, especially to children. LPG, when it burns, it doesn't make any soot or smoke.
In terms of health, I would say it's much better. Our kitchen staff are much happier than before.
Women have been disadvantaged for very many years. When they use wood fuel, they take a lot of time to go collecting the fuel. If they're to use LPG, that time will be cut to almost nil. So transitioning to LPG is helping empowering women.
We're moving from the autopilot era of AI to co-pilot era of AI.
We are just at the dawn of the robotics age.
The more experience you give it, the more capability this AI model can achieve.
Hopefully improves productivity, and it doesn't displace more jobs than it creates.
How to maintain our humanity if we live more and more digital lives.
The new era of tech on CNBC.
What was my ambition when I was starting out? survival. Grew up pretty rough, and we ended up homeless when I was in high school. It really motivated me to have a career in which I wanted to have an impact in people's lives. Art is bold creativity, bringing your visions to life. My dream for Kickstarter is that anybody with an idea can bring it into reality. If I can do it, I want to show other people that they can do it too. I just want to bust the door wide open for everybody that looks like me.
CNBC. Live ambitiously.
Welcome back. 7:30 a.m. Hong Kong, Singapore time, just half an hour away from Japan's market open. Let's take a look at Nikkei futures. 39,760 indicative is where we are going to be kicking off from. So that does suggest some softness of about 250 points or so. Dollar-yen rate 157.22. Martin.
Right, meantime, chaos continues in the wake of a global tech outage Friday, which disrupted computers running Microsoft's Windows operating system. According to data tracker FlightAware.com, American Airlines are still struggling to restore operations. More than 3,500 of Delta's direct and also connection flights were canceled over the last 3 days. Banks, hospitals, also shipping operations were also disrupted, but they are slowly coming back online after the largest IT outage in history. The culprit? A software update or patch from cybersecurity outfit CrowdStrike, which affected Microsoft's Windows operating systems. In a post on X, CEO George Kurtz stressed it was not a security incident or a cyber attack. The isolated issue has been identified, he says, and a fix has been deployed. CrowdStrike's stock, CRWD, tanked 11% in Friday trade. Microsoft was down less than 1%. Let's bring in Dave West, who is Cisco's president for Asia Pacific, Japan, and also the Greater China region. He joins us live around the desk here at the SGX. Dave, good to see you and appreciate your time, and thank you for coming by. What a weekend! We'll get to the outage in just a bit, but really the politics I need if only just a half a line, right? The president's tweet earlier, just a couple hours ago, that he's dropping out of the race means what for a company like Cisco?
Well, I'm not a politician nor a political expert. I'm much more on risk, cybersecurity, looking at technology. Yeah. So as I look at this, my assessment is much more around where's the technology landscape, where are things going, more so than the politics of the election. All
right, fair enough. So let's get to the tech outage then. Biggest in history, and all it took was basically just a patch. You know, companies send out patches all the time, but, the results and the consequences are usually not like this.
Well, it tells you how dependent we are, especially so much of us consume software as a service, consume software from the cloud. So it shows you how dependent we are to make sure that, one, things are tested properly, validated before they are pushed out, and then even as users, make sure that we validate before we push out to our users as well. So a lot of this is, hindsight is 20/20. We'll all go back and take a look at this and learn and hopefully get better. But it really shows you potentially how vulnerable we are to software patches, to upgrades and things like that really need to be tested, validated, as well as understanding your own ability to handle risk and digital resilience. And it's super important as we think about something like this.
And how vulnerable critical infrastructure is, and how vulnerable the health services are as well, and hospitals were affected by this. So you can argue that lives were at stake here. But in terms of the overall economic impact, Dave, we were talking earlier just offline. Can you give us some thoughts or visibility on what an event like this can do in economic terms?
Cisco recently acquired Splunk, and Splunk is a company that looks at digital resilience, monitors, looks at visibility, vulnerabilities, and all of that to make sure that companies are resilient. They recently did a cost of an unforeseen outage study, and they estimate that roughly on average, the impact is $500,000 an hour. And I'm sure in this case...
This is just in the U.S. or globally?
This is globally. And so looking at that, and that's just an average estimate. No one's ever seen an outage quite like this, as large and extensive as this. But it really gives you an estimate of how big this outage was.
Dave, what then were the lessons learned here, and what is Cisco bringing to the table, bringing to the narrative to mitigate these risks in the future, to prevent this from happening again?
Well, I think lessons we'll continue to assess this. We're all going to learn from this. And again, looking back, we can all sort of say, hey, we could have done something different. But I think looking forward, the way to do it is, one is understand how vulnerable we all are to software that's patched and driven down to many of the customers. One is testing and validating before releasing, and then what to do when you receive a piece of software that patches a system. What do you need to do as a user, as a customer of that software? Secondly is you need to assess digital resilience. You need to understand what your resilience is today. I wear an Oura watch or Oura ring.
Yeah.
Every morning I look at my resilience. Right? If it's marginal, okay, then I need to do something different. If it's solid, if I want to be exceptional. And so looking at becoming exceptional, understanding risk, doing continuous risk assessment, and really assessing your resilience to an incident like this, and understanding what's the priority within a company.
So, Dave, let me ask you, right? What is the bigger risk? I mean, what's the lesson learned from this whole incident? Is the bigger risk single point of failure, or is the bigger risk too much interconnectedness?
Well, the world is hyper-connected, and it's not going to change. It's going to continue to become much, much more hyper-connected.
China was fine, though.
Yeah, but depending on, how you leverage software and capabilities, how dependent you are maybe on one piece of software versus another, I think what's going to happen is everyone's going to step back and say, okay, what are the priority software items? Which ones run the business? How do we make sure that we build greater resilience so that we can address an impact like this or a vulnerability that comes out?
Can I ask why our friendly neighbourhood artificial intelligence, in this brave new world that we're hearing so much about, didn't save the day and preemptively spot an accident waiting to happen here?
Well, it depends on where companies are with their journey on AI. I mean, I'm sure predictive AI is used in many of the companies that saw an impact here. But that looks at an event, and at this point the event happened, and so it's hard to take action. And so I think as tools like generative AI become much more pervasive, to be able to assess.
But AI could be a solution in the future.
AI could absolutely be a solution for this, but also capabilities like running digital twins. For example, we just released a software solution called Hypershield, which runs a digital twin at the same time as there's a production. So instead of patching the production environment, you patch the digital twin. You watch the flows of data that's going through the digital twin, and then when you feel comfortable, then you can hit go and move it over to production.
So in other words, it's like it's having a dry run.
You beta the thing, right? And in this case, with CrowdStrike's patch, they did not test it before sending it out. If somebody pushed send, right? So let me ask you, other than stuff like that, which sounds very valuable, right? A company like Cisco, you guys are routers, you guys are the pipes, the distribution, right? What else or what more can you do?
Well, again, I think what we can do is, we've gone well beyond just the pipes. Now with Splunk, we're doing software, we're doing security automation orchestration, incident event management, using predictive and generative AI. I think what we can do is now start to really look at the resilience of an enterprise, understanding across all of the things that you mentioned, but the breadth of portfolio that the enterprise has. Understand, are there applications, how they're going to handle risk in an application or in the network or in other areas. So providing visibility, providing monitoring, and really giving a customer an understanding of their resilience and how prepared they are for something like this.
Dave, it's a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts on the subject.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Dave West there from Cisco. Let's take a look at the Bitcoin trade now. This is how we are shaking out for Bitcoin, 67,990. So getting something off a bid, up by 1.5%.
Today's Forex Update is sponsored by Interactive Brokers. 150 markets, 33 countries, 26 currencies. Today's Forex Update was sponsored by Interactive Brokers. Trade worldwide from a single unified platform.
Squawk on the Street, CNBC. Kelly Evans with in-depth reporting of the day's most compelling stories, economic analysis, market updates, and where to find opportunities now. Strengthen your investment strategy on the exchange. CNBC.
Tiny homes.
Welcome to my tiny house in Atlanta, Georgia.
One woman makes big money with a very little house.
Pretty spacious, honestly.
Plus the Big Apple's version of living little.
My 95 square foot New York City apartment.
And downsizing to unlock a better life by the beach.
No regrets about moving into a tiny house. There's no room for excess or unnecessary objects.
That's all next on Unlocked.
I think ambition creates a pathway. It gives you a purpose in life, and without it, you can drift along. On Squawk Box Europe, we covered 3 hours of live breaking events. It keeps me at the top of my game, having to react instantly to these developing events. You have to do the prep in this job. You have to spend the hours reading in. For me, it's instrumental as a journalist to work hard. I've always wanted to be the best journalist I can be, and it means something being on the best business channel in the world.
Welcome back. Interesting developments here. California Governor Gavin Newsom has just endorsed Kamala Harris for the Democratic presidential nomination. That's according to his post on X. And this is interesting, I say, because the California Governor, Gavin Newsom, has been regarded and considered as a potential aspirant, a possible presidential nominee. So this is significant news. President Biden stepping down could have repercussions not just for US politics, but also for the country's foreign policy in Asia. Emily Tan is watching the implications for Taiwan and joins us now. Good morning, Emily.
Hi there, Sri. And just to recap, we should start with a look at the Taiwan dollar, given the commentary that came through in the past week when Trump was talking about semiconductors and Taiwan's role in stealing the semiconductor industry from the United States. That sent shockwaves through the semiconductor stocks like TSMC. Of course, that dragged down the TAIEX as well last week. TSMC shares have fallen from their record highs, as has the TAIEX. Now, the Taiwan dollar, for its part, has been under a lot of pressure. Now, it has fallen to an 8-year low, levels that we have not seen since May 2016. And there has been intervention by the Taiwan Central Bank. If they hadn't stepped in, we would have seen it weaken further against the greenback. Year to date, it is down 6% against the U.S. dollar. Now, we're looking at it breach 32.70. We're at 32.79 last done, the Taiwan dollar against the greenback. So we're watching, of course, the currency as foreign institutional funds that take money out of the Taiwan market. Of course, that is why we're seeing further weakness in the Taiwan dollar. The TAIEX just on Friday shed more than 500 points, over 2%, with foreign institutional investors dumping 64 billion Taiwan dollars worth of shares. And of course, TSMC was not spared by this. It has now fallen below the $1,000 handle. It was down 3.5% in Friday trade. Now, in terms of what we're hearing on the ground about former President Trump, if he were to retake the White House, what could that mean for Taiwan? Now, Trump has signaled it might not be business as usual. Taiwan he has indicated should be paying for its own defense. So we could see a more transactional approach towards Taiwan because Trump sees China as its key challenge and threat, and Taiwan could be used as part of his plan in dealing with China. Taiwan on its own is not seen as a priority. So Trump has said in his commentary last week that he respects the Taiwan people, but they did take 100% of its chip business. So we are going to be continuing to watch the further fallout in the market as a result of those comments. Martin.
Yeah, I think more accurately, it's somewhere in the mid-90s, not fully 100%. But in any case, look, interesting that these are the concerns. Should it be a Trump presidency come in November with regards to Taiwan? At the same time, though, and this is another beat that you follow, what's going on with EVs or electric vehicles. Trump's been also out saying that, look, he would welcome Chinese investment in the U.S. In manufacturing capacity, in an EV factory, right? Which would, you would think, create American jobs as well. That was a little surprising for a lot of folks.
It certainly is surprising. That's after he had even threatened or tossed up the idea of 100% tariffs because he didn't want to see any of these companies, be it Chinese or any other auto companies, building their factories in Mexico and then using that as its way to get into the United States, kind of circumventing some of the tariffs that the U.S. does impose. So we're going to be watching, of course, any further comments coming out. The EV sector, China is a leader in this space, and we've seen many of the startups continue to globalize, branch out over into Europe and elsewhere. We were looking at names like Xpeng, NIO, and Li Auto. BYD, of course, is a big leader, and most recently building out factories, starting new ones in Thailand. It's got a big position there, controlling, I think it's the number 3 in terms of top market share in terms of EV makers, and the number 1 in terms of electric vehicles. So in terms of automakers, it's number 3, number 1 in the EV space. Now, as we continue to look at what a Trump administration could mean for Taiwan, analysts have warned against assuming that a second Trump administration would look similar to the first because his rhetoric on Taiwan has changed. His entire personnel in terms of foreign policy is also not the same or not expected to be the same. For Trump, international relations are driven more by bilateral economic ties, and geopolitics comes in a secondary. So there is some belief that Taiwan is taking advantage of the U.S. economically, and the view is likely to influence a broader view of Taiwan-U.S. relations. Taiwan is faced now with uncertainty and pressures to strengthen its own defenses, as former President Trump has indicated that Taiwan should be paying for its own defenses. Martin.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Emily Chantan, live up in Hong Kong. And this is breaking as well. Pete Buttigieg, the Transportation Secretary, has now thrown his endorsement behind Kamala Harris to be Democratic nominee for president as well. He joins Gavin Newsom, the California governor, as well as Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro as well. So we continue to follow developments there, and we'll break any further news as soon as it becomes available. Sheree?
It's interesting because that field of potential aspirants to the presidential nominee ticket is starting to narrow considerably. So I believe that Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, we still need to hear from her. And it's open question as to whether the actual open competition process in the DNC is going to go ahead or not. We'll see. Yeah. Coming up, we'll keep talking geopolitics and the impact it could have on the global travel industry. The CEO of Banyan Group joins us for an exclusive interview after the break.
I think we'll see lots of campaigns that have sort of harnessed things that mean a lot to consumers, things that really matter. So as you think about how you make an impact and how your brands make an impact in the world, what sort of pathways are you taking into?
Well, I mean, we have the most amazing example this year that we are bringing to Cannes, and we have won a Grand Prix for this.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And so our beautiful brand, Pedigree, is a brand that has been committed for many, many years to help end pet homelessness. We're not here just to sell, we're here to find homes for dogs. This year, AI enabled us to do something that we dreamed about before, but it was not possible, which is taking dogs from shelters, recording them, but then being able to show them on our ads. Our ambition is that for the future, every pedigree ad will feature a homeless dog. The moment that dog is adopted, we can quickly shift and showcase a new dog. And so that way we can help get dogs in homes. With the help of AI, we can now do it on stills, but in the future we will be able to do it in video. And we don't think that the future is too far away. And so we will not have to have two communications, one for adoption and one for our food. We will be able to have just one and it will do those jobs. So we're super excited about the possibilities.
You're confident you can beat Mario in terms of popularity?
It is the company behind the iconic Sonic the Hedgehog. On the next Managing Asia, I'm at Sega Sammy Group's headquarters in Tokyo, Japan, to speak with CEO Haruki Satomi.
Our vision is to bringing our video game to 3 billion gamers in the world.
Catch more of my exclusive interview on the next Managing Asia.
Welcome back. Monday here on Squawk Asia. It certainly feels like travel is back, but has the global travel industry fully recovered from the pandemic? According to UN Tourism, the answer is, well, almost. CNBC's travel editor Monica Petrelli is here with the story. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Marty. Yeah, so according to UN Tourism, at the close of the first quarter of this year, international arrivals were back at 97% compared to 2019 levels. So close, but not there yet. Now, this, of course, a global number. If we look into the certain regions, we see significant variance. But for the first time at the close of Q1 this year, we see 3 regions crossing that threshold, namely the Middle East, which already had, but now up an extraordinary 36%. Africa, here a bit of a surprise, up 5%, and Europe just crossing that threshold at 1%. But on the other side of the line, we can see the Americas just shy of meeting that threshold, and Asia Pacific still lagging at 82%. But that number for Asia belying a huge jump in arrivals this year, because Asia closed the 2023 at just 65%. Now, you might look at those numbers and think it's pretty clear Asia Pacific will fully recover this year in terms of tourism arrivals. However, Fitch Ratings throwing some cold water on this, saying that's not likely to happen until the beginning of next year, saying a recovery slowdown is expected for this year, citing continued flight capacity restraints and also reluctance coming out of 2 major markets. That's China and Japan, where travelers are deterred by high travel costs and also weakness in their local currencies. Now, China, for its part, travelers are slowly and steadily returning. Fitch estimating Chinese travelers will be outbound again at 86% of their 2019 levels by the end of this year. But there is one chart that China is dominating once again, and that is tourism expenditures collectively. Chinese international travel spending about $196 billion last year. That's well ahead of Americans at $150 billion. But I wanted you to take a look at the bottom of this chart. We see India on the board here at the 8th largest travel spenders in the world. A joint report coming from Booking.com and McKinsey saying that India could leapfrog to the 4th spot as early as 2030.
That is very interesting, considering the elections in India. And I want to turn that political dimension over to our next guest, Monica. Thank you very much indeed for that. Ho Kwon Ping is with us now, founder and executive chairman at Banyan Group. Kwon Ping, thank you very much indeed for joining us. At least 97 countries have held elections or are currently still holding elections in 2024. India, we talked about, Mexico, United States, of course. Is this a consideration for visitors and travellers?
I don't think the fact that there are elections are really affecting people traveling. But I think the outcome of these elections, particularly in the U.S., is going to have a big effect. It's going to have a big knock-on rather than direct effect on many people's business. For us in particular, say, we've got a lot of business in China. So exactly what's going to happen after whoever's the new president, what the policies are going to be on China, hardening or not, and even perhaps the application of greater sanctions, even on the hospitality industry like they did on Russia. These are going to have great impact.
No, and as you mentioned, you do have quite a bit of hotels in China, but also recently opening your first hotel in Mexico. Now, we've seen a lot of European and North American brands coming into Asia. What's been your experience taking a well-known Asian brand into the North American market?
Well, actually, we didn't open the first hotel in Mexico. We've been in Mexico for 15 years. We've opened the first new brand called Vea, which is a destination spa. That just opened in Guadalupe, in Mexico, near Ensenada, quite close to San Diego. But we have altogether about, I think, 6 or 7 hotels already existing in Mexico. So we know the Mexican market extremely well. And as most people would know, Mexico is pretty much a proxy for America. I don't think politics is going to affect very much. Even during the Trump days, when there was a lot of tension with Mexico, our business was still doing very well. I think Mexico is going to depend more on domestic issues such as the violence of the drug trade and so on. But we're pretty sanguine about Mexico, but not necessarily about other countries.
And one of the strategies that you've talked about is to leverage the growth of the middle class in certain regions of the world. Given that, do you have plans to expand into India?
We do think there's a massive growth in the middle class in Asia, and that's propelled the growth of our company from basically, for many years, only 2 brands to now about 8 or 9 brands, some of which were even rolled out during COVID. We see a lot of outbound tourism from India. That's been humongous. And we're seeing that in Thailand and elsewhere, and we think India is an excellent outbound market. As far as an inbound market is concerned, however, I'm not too sure. The domestic market is very strong, but inbound into India hasn't been as much as we would have hoped it to be. And setting up a hotel in India is still a challenge. It takes a long time. There's a lot of bureaucracy. So we're a little bit more hesitant about India, although the potential is always there.
And Banyan Group, one of the few hotel hospitality groups that is involved in both property development, hotel ownership to a lesser extent, and of course hotel management. Now, you recently talked about how the market doesn't really understand a group doing all of that, and you might be looking into restructuring, and you indicated that would be done quickly. I'm wondering if you can give us a status update on that.
Well, you have to define quick. I mean, we've talked about it for a long time. There's a lot of regulatory issues. There are some shareholder issues. There's other types of issues. But we've long said that we're currently trading at about half of our actual, our announced NAV. But in terms of our adjusted NAV, which would adjust for the land bank that we have and so on, we're trading at about less than a third of that valuation. So obviously, and one of the major reasons for that is we are equally balanced between hotel management fees, ownership of hotels, and property development. And the market doesn't particularly like that, and there's very little liquidity also in our stock. So basically, we are looking very actively at restructuring the company.
Gotcha. All right, KP, listen, great to talk. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Keep safe. Do it again soon. Ho Kwon Ping there from the Banyan Group joining us live. All right, we've got Tokyo Seoul and Sydney opening up for trade just around the corner when we come right back in 2.
At Interactive Brokers, independent RIAs work with the best research and trading tools designed to help them outperform the markets. Meet them at Interactive Brokers Investors Marketplace for advisors. Advisors at Interactive Brokers keep all they earn on our low-cost platform, with no ticket fees or custody charges, low margin rates, and high interest earned on idle cash. To get better results, get a better platform. The best informed investors choose Interactive Brokers.
Global markets, up to the minute, front page news. Wake up to Frank Holland and Worldwide Exchange. CNBC. Can't miss reporting that impacts your money now. Be here when the opening bell rings. Squawk on the street. CNBC. Real money, real debate, real-time moves. Scott Wapner, live from the New York Stock Exchange. Halftime report. CNBC.
You want people to trust their money.
This is the market that we're operating in. They need to drive their plans forward.
We need to pursue new business opportunity.
You're always better off having a fortress balance sheet.
Prudent fiscal policy can contain debt.
You're going to take less risk to get to your target now more than ever before.
Making sense of the global economy. CNBC.
If you're watching CNBC, it's because you want to get an edge. You want to get ahead. It's our job to deliver that. My ambition is just to be the best that we can possibly be. More often than not, I kind of forget that the cameras are there. But when there's really a burning question, I'm thinking about what my mom would want to hear. I've been thinking about some of the investors I know who are watching. Those are the same questions we have. People always ask me what I want to do next, and I always think they're a little crazy. This is what I want to do. It's the best job you could possibly have.
Good morning, everybody. Watching markets along with the political drama in D.C. U.S. President Biden dropping his re-election bid just hours ago, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. Asian markets are opening up like this, as you can see behind me. Tokyo not off to a good start, down 0.25%. The Korean market is not showing any numbers just yet, and we'll have to wait and see how Sydney opens up as well. Shri?
A number of top Democrats also moving to endorse Harris's nomination, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, California's Governor Gavin Newsom, and Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg. U.S. futures looking steady.
And China releases a key document outlining plans to focus on growth, tech and military developments over the next 5 years, following the country's third plenum last week.
Welcome back. Top story today. US President Joe Biden bowing to party pressure and withdrawing from the presidential race. However, he did endorse Kamala Harris. Now, let's take a look at the market reaction here. Remember, we are, aside from the politics, we are inheriting a weaker session on Wall Street on Friday. The data didn't do the market any favours, given the jobless claims were weaker than expected, lowest since August. Nikkei 225 well below 40k, Kospi off by 0.2%, Australia down just marginally. So it seems that the markets are just trying to get their heads around the implications for November the 5th and whether this means a pronounced period of volatility. Let's give you US futures just one more time. They are suggesting some positivity, but again, it just seems to be a very guarded outlook in terms of the futures picture. There could be a lot of volatility in the run-up to the regular session. We're also in the thick of earnings, and we have data. We have quarterly GDP to digest as well. Right, our US colleague Emily Wilkins has been watching the political developments in the United States and joins us now from Washington, D.C. Emily, so in terms of what's next, we've heard from names like Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg as well, and Josh Shapiro. Does it feel like this is going to be an uncontested DNC for Kamala Harris?
That is a little bit of the vibe that we're getting right now, Martin. It does seem like we are seeing just a flood of support for Harris. And of course, then that question of who else would likely run at this point against her or challenge her to get that Democratic nomination. Now, we have heard, NBC can report, that Senator Joe Manchin is considering a potential presidential run. Manchin, of course, was one of the more centrist Democrats. He really did try to appeal more to Republicans and independents. And the thought process is is that if he gets into the race, he can kind of make that pitch for Democrats. But of course, if it does get into the race, that could potentially take votes away from a potential run for Harris or whoever the Democratic nominee is. Also, Manchin would actually have to flip. If he's now an independent, he would have to go back to being a Democrat. But look, Harris is already working the phone line. She's making calls to lawmakers on Capitol Hill. She's pitching herself in the race. And from a fundraising perspective, it's going really well for her. Joe Biden raised about $27 million in the day after his debate. Harris, in like the 5 hours that she has been the nominee, has already raised more than that, more than $27 million, and the numbers just continue to keep going up. There's clearly a lot of enthusiasm for a new person at the top of the ticket. Obviously, Democrats are feeling very reinvigorated right now. Of course, we're going to have to keep a close eye on the polls, what it could mean for a Harris-Trump matchup, what it might mean for a different Democratic nominee-Trump matchup. There are a lot of uncertainties here. It's only Sunday night. I think we'll have a long way to go before we get a very clear sense of exactly what the process is going to be. Because remember, there are a number of Democrats who are saying, look, we are completely fine with Harris, but we need to have an open process, and we actually need to kind of validate her candidacy by making sure that she sort of earns that nomination instead of having it just be handed to her.
Yeah, that's going to be about 2 weeks away, right? The DNC. So, Emily, what are we to make of news? And this is just within the last hour or so. Pete Buttigieg has thrown his endorsement behind Kamala Harris. Gavin Newsom as well, the California governor, the Pennsylvania governor, Shapiro. We have not heard yet from Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. When that does happen, then it means all the people who were potentially, who could potentially challenge Kamala Harris for the nomination, they basically said, no mas, we'll go with Harris.
Completely. And this is why it's such uncharted territory. I mean, it's going to be a question if someone even tries to challenge Harris at this point. And the fact of the matter is that if the nominee does wind up being someone other than Harris, they're going to have a number of hoops to jump through that she simply won't. Because she's currently already on the ballot as Biden's running mate, she has easy access to the fundraising, she has easy access to the infrastructure, potentially easier access to making sure that she is on the ballot. There might be difficulties if they have someone else. But really, the outpouring of support for Harris could also be an indication that Democrats know they don't have a lot of time. You know, you're right. The DNC, it's just a couple weeks away. But even before then, Democrats were going to do this virtual roll call vote to pick their nominee. And that's because of some discrepancies in state laws and when folks need to actually be named to get on the ballot, trying to kind of dot their I's, cross their T's here. But it really speaks to how complicated this process could potentially get. And you have Republican and conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation that want to challenge it in court. They want Biden to stay on the ticket because they see from their polls that Trump will have an easy time beating him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. If Harris officially becomes the nominee, what the process is for her to get there, and then how much her candidacy is challenged on a state-by-state basis by some of these conservative groups. Lots of unknowns here that we're continuing to follow, but at this point, it is very clear that Harris has a ton of momentum behind her.
Absolutely, Emily, and your point about respecting the open competition and the open contest that is really enshrined as part of the Democratic National Convention is very well taken. But at this point, do we have any information as to who is emerging potentially as the front runner for the vice presidential nominee?
That's another good question, and maybe that's part of the key to why you're seeing so many potential candidates go ahead and throw their support behind Harris. It might be part of the beginning of vying for the VP spot. I mean, certainly when you think about vice presidents in the past, it's not always true, but often the idea is that you want someone who's different from the nominee themselves and can appeal to a bit of a different group out there. So you take Josh Shapiro with Pennsylvania, very competitive state. Adding him to the ticket could really lock up Pennsylvania for the Democrats. Roy Cooper in North Carolina, another state that has gone to Trump, but it remains competitive, and that could potentially put him in the mix. Having someone like Pete Buttigieg, who really got his start in the Midwest, who's white, who's a guy who has military background, or even a Gavin Newsom, who also, kind of fits a different demographic than Harris and could appeal to a different group of individuals. And so I think that's what a lot of folks are expecting when it comes to who Harris might pick as her for vice president. Should, of course, she emerge as the nominee, I think she's going to really be looking for someone who can appeal to a group of Democratic voters who might not otherwise be attracted to her.
Yes, all eyes on those swing states, especially Pennsylvania, so that's going to be significant. Emily, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Let's take a look at this from a different perspective. China's online media also tracking the political drama in DC. Sam Vados is watching that for us. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to you, Sri and Martin. I was just listening to Emily, and I think just picking up on that, who Harris would likely put around her if she is then the nominee of the presidency. Certainly, China would be looking at this as to what this would mean for continuity under the current Biden administration and what that has certainly meant in terms of export controls, some of these duties that we've seen inherited from Trump, but the Biden team very much running with around some of the economic partnerships. So there is an expectation that Harris would likely continue with a lot of these foreign policy objectives, as we've seen. We know that she has met with the likes of President Xi Jinping, but she's also met with the leadership in Taiwan as well. But there has been very much an emphasis under her of working with allies, particularly in this part of the world, in Asia, to counter the threat of China. So that is something that we will continue to watch. And no doubt President Xi Jinping, last week, there had been an expectation that he was perhaps sitting in Beijing watching to see who Trump perhaps would put around him on his ticket to really try to prepare themselves for any expected policy down the road. But now, perhaps, guys, they are looking at what is unfolding with the Democrats and probably thinking the same thing, watching what those positions will be, who will emerge as the sort of front runners here on that ticket. There has been no sort of official commentary on this yet, because we know that the Chinese Foreign Ministry will meet this afternoon in their regular press briefing, where we're likely to perhaps ask a question and hear what they have to say about all of this. But Xinhua, for the most part, has been basically reposting the news so far. This very much, I suppose, feeds into the propaganda around the sort of divided democracy they like to kind of emphasize over in China. But Chinese social media very much talking about this morning. Hashtag Biden drops out of the race is the top trending topic on Weibo, and then Trump responding to Biden dropping out of the race is also something that's being talking about. And that's always fascinating, because this stuff is censored in China. Yeah. So when you do see these sort of political opinions being talked about, it is always quite interesting in terms of that discourse.
Yeah, it's practically almost official, right? Understood. Sam, thank you. Sam Vados there. All right, so keep talking. Bring in Frank Luntz, pollster and also communication strategist, joining us live. Frank, good to see you and appreciate your time. It wasn't that long ago that you were quoted saying that, unless something really dramatic happens, Trump is going to be the next president. What we saw happen 6 and a bit hours ago when the president dropped out of the race by tweeting on X, is that something?
Yes, it is, and it's significant. And I noticed that there's some groups that supported Nikki Haley that have actually come out in favor of Kamala Harris. That's significant, because those are Republican voters that moved over to Harris's camp. She's going to have an uphill battle, because in the end, it was still Biden-Harris. She's going to have to win back Latino voters, union members. She's going to have, in some cases, the wind at her back, and in some cases, in her face. Her greatest advantage is that she's got the apparatus, the organization. She's planning on this, has been for years now, and so she's prepared. And I've noticed that Democrat after Democrat who might challenge her, they're all folding tonight. They're all endorsing her tonight. They're not waiting. They're doing it now. So my question that I have is, will she have the nomination sewed up within the next 24 hours?
Indeed. Well, we shall see. I think it's only Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan who has now thrown her endorsement behind Kamala Harris yet, but see if and when that does happen. But Frank, my question to you is, I've got two actually. Kamala Harris, does she have what it takes to tip swing voters in her favor, or in the Dems' favor? One, and probably more consequentially, this whole issue, the two issues of gender as well as race, are they more likely to be a risk for her, or are they going to play in her favor?
Well, on the first question, it's not really swing voters. It's simply Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Those are the key states, and those are the states that she'll be playing in. And so I could see her picking Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania because that would bring Pennsylvania to the Harris camp. People forget that she ran in 2020. She raised tens of millions of dollars. She got an early jump, and she never even made it to the first caucus. Her campaign was not well run. It was not well waged because of her inability to connect. Now she's had almost 4 years to fix that, but people had very high expectations of her back then, and we've seemed to have forgotten that she's had challenges over the last 4 years, a very hostile relationship with the media. She was given the responsibility of immigration, and that is now either the first or second most important issue across the country, and she's going to have to defend Biden's immigration policy. In terms of being a woman, an African American, I actually think that's an advantage for her, that there are so many women who want a woman as president. They waited for Hillary Clinton, they failed there, and they're determined not to fail. So I do not see it as a negative, and in fact, in some places, I see it as a positive. The key for her is, does she win back the union vote? Because it's essential in these industrial Midwestern states. And does she win back the Latino vote that Trump seems to be doing especially well in, because that impacts Arizona and Nevada, two other key swing states.
All right. Two L's there, Latinos and also labor.
Frank, the economy, seen from our perspective, continues to be the preeminent election issue. The economic track record going to be an advantage for a Kamala Harris ticket, if it comes to that?
No, it's a disadvantage. And the word that people use in my focus groups, affordability. And they add up the last 4 years, and they look at the price of food and fuel. They look at housing and health care. They blame the Biden-Harris administration for that. Affordability is going to be Trump's strong point, strong suit. And it's a chance for him to say, look at my administration, there was no inflation. In the 4 years of Biden-Harris, look at how much you're paying. So that's the key issue in terms of the economy. No one's talking about jobs. No one's talking about interest rates. It's all about affordability. And the other key issue, immigration, that's national security. And again, the Biden-Harris candidacy, it's not strong. The record of the border and the immigration challenges also benefit the Republicans. Her strength actually comes from her gender, comes from her ethnicity, comes from the fact that she doesn't look and sound like a politician. The weakness is that she's going to have to defend the Biden record on these two issues, which is not good. And I'll give you one polling data point. 55% of Americans think that the Trump administration was successful overall. Only 39% think the Biden administration was successful. She's going to have to close that gap if she's going to win the election.
Frank, what are the odds of an inconclusive result? And what are the odds of a divided Congress and divided government?
I think they're very high. I could see this election being 272 to 268 in the Electoral College. The Democrats winning Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The Republicans winning the other key swing states, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. And I just think, and we get a divided House and Senate, or a 50-50 House and Senate, and our democracy cannot support that. And the one thing I would say to your viewers is that you can get chaos and confusion by opening up the Democratic convention, by giving voters, Democrat delegates, the chance to choose and ratify Harris. That will create a mess for the next month, but that'll be good for her in the general election. Or you can take the route of least confusion and chaos, but then she looks like she's been appointed and approved by the elite in Washington, and nobody trusts them right now. One last point. Only 4% of Americans are undecided. It's this tiny little sliver. And in those 3 key states, we're going to spend as much as $2 billion on literally 1/5 of 1% of the American electorate. It's mind-boggling, but that's what's about to happen.
Frank, it's been fascinating talking to you, and I'm sure we're going to check in with you in the not-too-distant future in the run-up to November the 5th. Thank you, Frank. Frank Luntz there, Polster and communications strategist. China's central bank making a minor tweak to the 7-day reverse repo rate earlier this hour, trimming it to 1.7% from 1.8% prior, and saying that it's ready to make counter-cyclical adjustments to support the economy if necessary, Martin.
All right, going to go for a quick break. Quick look at Treasury yields before we head out. Take a look. You've got the benchmark at 10, pricing at, where are we there? Goodness. Yeah, there we go. At 101.23. Twos at, yeah. Anyway, okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
For me, Squawk Box is breakfast with the most interesting people in the world.
It's a privilege to get to talk to them every day.
It's more entertaining than any other morning show, but you might get some useful information.
Squawk Box, weeknights. Tiny homes.
Welcome to my tiny house in Atlanta, Georgia.
One woman makes big money with a very little house.
Pretty spacious, honestly.
Plus the Big Apple's version of living little.
My 95 square foot New York City apartment.
And downsizing to unlock a better life by the beach.
No regrets about moving into a tiny house. There's no room for excess or unnecessary objects.
That's all next on Unlocked.
Ambition creates motivation and power. Motivation to take risks and challenge oneself, and power to find solutions and solve problems. When you reach your goal, that makes you want to go farther in the future.
Welcome back. Monday morning here on Squawk Asia. I've got some reaction from Asian leaders to the decision about 7 hours ago from President Biden to drop out of the presidential race. And this is Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida saying he recognizes Biden's decision to withdraw from the race was made in the best interest of politics, U.S. politics, and his own party. And he says that the Japanese-U.S. alliance is a pillar of diplomacy and also security, and will closely watch developments. So just wanted to get that out there. All right, meantime, Lynn has been keeping track of Japanese markets. She joins us now live. Good morning.
Good morning, Martin. And we're seeing that sell-off in terms of Japanese markets continuing into the new week. The Nikkei 225 is down close to 300 points and below that 40,000 line now. Now, of course, when we look at the markets at the moment, we have come off that negative lead from Wall Street. But of course, the markets are digesting the news about Joe Biden dropping out of the presidential race. What does this mean for Japanese markets as well as for US-Japan relations? Of course, Martin just highlighted some of the comments coming through from the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. But, you know, we've seen that in terms of Japan's top echelon, they have been hedging both ways. The view is, of course, that in terms of Kamala Harris, she's seen as a front runner, that analysts say that we'll see more of the status quo in terms of US foreign policy, in terms of US relations with traditional alliances. But in terms of a Donald Trump 2.0, we've seen as early as March of this year that, for example, the former Prime Minister Taro Aso was seeking out, and eventually he did get that face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump, with officials in Japan concerned about what a potential return of Donald Trump to the White House could mean for that relationship for Japanese companies in terms of tariffs, as well as, of course, the security alliance. Now, away from the politics, as we look forward to the Japanese equities, analysts say that one of the major catalysts is going to be the earnings, because that is now in full swing. And we're seeing, of course, in terms of those export-driven firms, the view is that with the weak yen, that we could get upside in terms of the results. Also, when you look at what we saw with TSMC last week, it was a strong result. And given that a lot of the Japanese semiconductor names are along that supply chain, analysts saying that there could be upside playing through, although we did get a miss for Disco Corp last week. And then just quickly, in terms of dollar yen, it's currently sitting at 157.4. And we're seeing in terms of the data that came through on Friday from the US commodities futures trading, that in terms of short positioning, Shri, that is falling back about 30,000 contracts, given, of course, there is that speculation about that intervention action in the last couple of weeks.
And what a Trump presidency could mean for the dollar. And he has gone on record saying that he favours a weaker dollar. So that has implications for the yen and the BOJ as well. Lynn, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's bring it back to US equity futures and their performance following US President Joe Biden's decision to drop his re-election bid. Not a great deal of movement here. They are holding steady, holding firm, and pointing to very modest gains, just fractional gains in the beginning of the session. Right, let's bring in CNBC's Dee Bosa now, who is watching the DC drama unfold and has the Silicon Valley perspective. Dee, great to see you.
Hey, Sri, it's great to chat with you as well. So we've been tracking the Silicon Valley influence in this election, and it's just been growing bigger and bigger in terms of very loud vocal voices, billionaires, and money going into support. So we haven't heard much immediately from the big Silicon Valley Democratic donors since Biden's disastrous debate performance. We've been hearing a lot more in recent weeks from the Trump faction of tech. A source who has worked in both Washington and the Bay Area tells me that this will now represent a bit of a reset, especially for the Dems and tech who were resigned. They're now going to be rejuvenated. At the same time, Sri and Martin, it is not clear that Silicon Valley is jumping to support Kamala Harris. While some of the biggest Democratic donors, like Reid Hoffman, backed her immediately by posting on X, there's others like Vinod Khosla, Reed Hastings, have not. One VC tells me that Harris is lacking or still unknown in many areas that are important to the industry. Another source says that some very big players who overlap with VC are excited. These are folks that were holding money back. They'll be back in and they're close to Harris. What is clear, though, guys, is that her ties to Silicon Valley, they run deep. Her brother-in-law is Tony West. That's chief legal officer at Uber. Former staff members of hers have gone on to take positions at big tech companies like Amazon and Google. She's also had support in the past from the likes of Sheryl Sandberg and Laureen Powell Jobs in past California election campaigns. Back in 2020, I thought this was interesting. When she was selected as Biden's running mate, there were actually worries that she would be too close to tech. Of course, the opposite has happened. The Biden administration has been overwhelmingly hostile to tech through the FTC and DOJ appointments, M&A deals, artificial intelligence regulation, issues of which many of the VCs I speak to on both sides are critical. That has been a key reason that we have seen so many more key Silicon Valley figures come out in support of Trump, something that was almost unthinkable 8 years ago. I want to mention this interview last week. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg at another network stopped short of endorsing a candidate, but he called Trump's reaction to the shooting.
Great perspective. We've got to wrap it up there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're back in 2 minutes.
We're absolutely living in exciting times. I think these are defining moments.
We have to stay on top of the culture. You just have to be cognizant, you have to be open-minded, and you have to react to what people want.
It's really about knowing your market, knowing your persona, telling the story which is consistent with your brand.
Always go back to the foundational principles for any marketer, which is just stay close to your market. The closer you stay to your consumers, the quicker you spot those trends.
The main thing that organizations have to do is really listen, take technology like AI and marry it with creative processes and the creative value chain.
We're using such small capacity of our brains and our imagination, and if AI can unlock areas of it that we can't, then who knows what the potential for storytelling will be.
Its potential is profoundly impacting all aspects of people's lives.
Generative AI can help marketeers to be faster, but also to be better at their jobs.
We're moving from the autopilot era of AI to co-pilot era of AI.
We are just at the dawn of the robotics age.
The more experience you give it, the more capability this AI model can achieve.
Hopefully improves productivity, and it doesn't displace more jobs than it creates.
How to maintain our humanity if we live more and more digital lives.
The new era of tech on CNBC.
I've always had an ambition to do something I loved. I actually got my degree in hotel and restaurant management, but I had a thing for numbers, and that's how I got onto Wall Street. I became a trader. I traded all different kinds of asset classes. The energy in a newsroom when there's a big news day out there feels a lot like the energy on a trading desk on Wall Street. There's a lot of activity. The stuff we do at CNBC means so much to so many people because it empowers you with knowledge and with everything that you need to make the right decisions.
CNBC. Live ambitiously.